Hello and welcome to the Runners World podcast with me, Rick Pearson.
And me, Ben Hobson, and our guests this week, Bethan Taylor-Swaine, Sabrina Pace-Humphreys. I was like, these double-barrel names. Two guests with two double-barrel names.
I know what the chances.
On.
What the chances. Yeah, you did well, I think.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah,
Thanks.
well done.
Good.
Nailed it. Today we're going to talk about running and mansplaining. And I thought maybe we could start off with a definition of mansplaining, because maybe it's a kind of area that's a grey area for some. How would you define it, Bethan, if you said mansplaining to you?
You definitely know it if you're experiencing it, to start with. Typically, it's where a man addresses a woman and assumes she lacks knowledge in the area. So sometimes it will be totally assumes lack of knowledge. Sometimes it will be to correct something that's wrong. The problem is that can get horribly wrong when it turns out the woman you're talking to is actually an expert.
Right. Or even just has an equal level of understanding,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely. So, it could be kind of a guy coming up to you at a race and saying, oh, you're not really in the right kit for this race, love.
Yeah, okay.
Which Sabrina's nodding. It could be somebody online saying to me that I don't understand what feminism is.
Right, that's interesting.
And that can become, it's very patronising.
Yeah.
It also minimises women's understanding of a whole host of different issues, from making sure you got the right kit to understanding what we're advocating for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Huge.
I think that there's probably like a collective eye roll from listeners or something when we suddenly go, we're going to talk about mansplaining, and there'll be some people going, oh, God.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get into this sort of the notion of some men would probably say like, well, I'm just trying to help. There's that argument. But I wanted to get beyond that into this sort of probably the unconscious or the conscious power bias that comes with being between men and women in running and just generally in the space. So how does that work? Well, when we're talking about mansplaining and trying to explain the concept, it's not just an unwanted comment. There's actually a far greater reaching sort of problem with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, my line of work, so I am a qualified run coach and personal trainer, amongst many other things.
Yeah.
And it really feeds into what, as women or as a girl, that I experienced growing up, which was because of the gender that I am, that I'm not as intelligent or as experienced or have as much knowledge or even a far greater knowledge.
Yeah.
And, we battle with this as women. I'm the mother of 3 girls, from 27 down to 15. And watching them grow up and what they have had to deal with in sport, around topics such as, girls don't do that, or girls don't behave that way, or girls don't wear that, or when it comes to girls and periods and puberty, I can't wear that. I think that it just feeds into, when it comes to running, a space where my experience shows me as a coach to women that women already have a lot that they're dealing with in terms of barriers getting into that space anyway. Yeah. So actually, when it comes to the mansplaining or I'm just giving advice, my response is, but we didn't ask for it. Yeah. We're already dealing as women with so many barriers to access, running, which is what we're talking about today. And how our lives and the caretakers that we are, whether it's as parents or carers or holding down jobs, et cetera, that actually when we come into this running space, which is perceived as a space for all, a space to be, and early interactions with men, especially, are let me unconsciously, because I don't think I'm mansplaining to you, I think I'm just giving advice, put you in your place.
Yeah.
100%.
And that's where it really causes problems in terms of that internal dialogue as a woman of maybe I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Or maybe the plan that I'm following or the plan that a coach has designed for me isn't right. Because he's a man and he's in, and I hate to say it, but he's a man and he's a lot faster than me, or he's in short shorts, or he's in all the
kit.
expensive kit.
Yeah.
So he's maybe he's got to know, maybe he is better than me.
Yeah.
And it's just not true.
Yeah,
It's so interesting. It starts so early as well. My daughter is 3.5, and she has already come home from nursery school saying that boys won't play football with her. She very robustly informed them that football was for everybody without my prompting. But those are children pre-primary age.
Yeah.
That's really young. And from my perspective, a lot of it comes down to the way that sport has developed. You know, sport is rooted in, as we know it, sport is rooted in the Victorian era. It evolved as a way of kind of formalising masculinity and demonstrating kind of the skills required to be an officer in the army or the robustness required to be a private. It was a way of showing strength, masculinity. There's a concept called Christian muscularity, which is about kind of the values of both physical discipline, but also kind of moral regulation.
Right.
Loads of football clubs, for example, are linked to either churches or industry. That's because they came up through these churches and industry as a way of managing the workers' time when they weren't working. It was to keep them out of the pubs.
Right.
Right.
So it's really grown up as this men's place. It's a male domain. And often to the exclusion of women. You know, there have always been exceptional women who've ducked in and out of sport, but mostly it's been designed to our exclusion. You know, it'll make us look ugly. It'll affect their fertility. Our uteruses will definitely drop out.
Oh,
We don't have
classic.
it's a well-known problem. We don't have the fortitude to participate in it. And although we've moved on, we've made tons of progress, and I don't think very many people consciously think about it in those terms anymore, although maybe they do in private. It's so deeply ingrained in our cultural ideology and what grounds our sporting culture, that it's actually really hard to avoid. You know, it's still very much there. The debates that happen around women's football, for example. You know, comparatively, participation in running is quite marginal compared to those conversations, but it all influences each other. It's all overlapping. So if we're seeing pundits on, you know, the nightly sports news, talking about women's football in a more negative light or lack of funding or any of those issues, that's going to play over into other sports, particularly at grassroots level. And, you know, that combined with a whole host of other barriers to participation, which honestly I could be here all day explaining, means that we are seeing fewer women participating, women feeling like it's not their space to participate, women not progressing in their participation as well, dropouts, all sorts of issues. And it's huge. And that's led by essentially institutional, kind of cultural mansplaining.
Yeah, right.
That's where we're at.
In terms of like your own personal experience of mansplaining from other runners, could you give us...
Has there been a prime?
Yeah, could you give us an example of what it like, just to bring it to life, I guess?
Yeah, so my own personal, so I'll give you two. So I coach women's only run groups. I have done since 2016. It's kind of when I had a bit of a life change. I was like, what do I want to do? I want to work with women.
Yeah.
I want women to experience some of what I'd experienced. So my own personal experience, I remember when I was still part of a traditional UK athletics run club. And I had probably been running for around about a year. And had done my first half marathon. I remember standing there. You know how you gather at the beginning of those club runs and you've got your leaders saying, oh, we're going out to do this tonight, etc. And I remember this guy, this stalwart of the club he was pitched as, you know, he's been there for years and years. And he came to my side, put his arm around my shoulder. I remember it so vividly because it was something I had to work through. And he said in front of probably around about 40 people, hey, love, you know what? If you lost half a stone, I reckon you could probably PB that half marathon next time.
Right.
And I just stood there and I was so, you know, I laughed it off. Ha, 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 ha. I need to stop eating more chocolate, you know, as much chocolate. But I felt so small in that moment. And I felt everyone must think the same. And I came from, you know, I'd had 4 children by then. Literally, my youngest was like a year old
Right.
then.
Okay. Yeah.
And I have no doubt. And again, it's this, I want to say, because I really like to see the good in people. So part of me is like, and friends would say to me, oh, you know, he's just old. He didn't mean it. He probably thought he was doing you a favor. But that's the problem.
Right, yeah.
It's that it didn't do me any favors, because then I went on as a woman who has always been fighting with that whole thing that a good friend of mine talks about as well, this whole you have to be thin to be fast, you have to be thin to be good, you have to be carrying less weight, all of that BS. It really messed with me for months. And I was trying to kind of get to a lean weight because I thought it would make me faster, because I thought, or people insinuated, this man had been with the club 20 years, he'd coached the youth team and the adult team, and I didn't feel, I felt that he must know more than me.
Yeah, right.
And I did lose weight. And did it make me faster? No. It made me ill. It's made me more susceptible to injury, actually. And it's something that I'm so against now, because I know how it impacted me. And I do not believe, and the science shows, like, lighter does not mean faster.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
And in terms of how I coach other women, I remember being out with my women's run group, and we were going past, as many women have experienced, a large group of men. Now, these men were out during the day at kind of community service type, men, but, group of men. And that is quite, even for me, quite a confident runner. I kind of shrink into myself and kind of try and make my chest bigger and try and be big. But still, I always think, I hope they don't say anything. I hope they don't say anything. And I remember running and leading my women and pushing them through this group of men. And literally these men were like, whoa, oh, hey, and I actually just stopped and went up to these men and said, do you know just how off-putting, how insensitive you making those comments, making those noises are for women? And how I went about it was like, how would you feel if we were your mother or your sister or someone a female that you really cared about? Because it doesn't feel good. It doesn't spur us on.
Yeah.
It actually just makes us really a little bit fearful about running past the next group of men. And they kind of, I think, thought about it for a minute and then were quiet and we ran past. But that's not going to be new to many women that are listening to this. But it is the thing that can stop women, especially new women runners who I coach, wanting to go out on their own.
I think there's an interesting point there, is that there's a very thin line, or possibly no real line, between someone mansplaining something and feeling compelled to be a knowledge coming along and saying something, and then, as you say, like basically just jeering. And I think that because my assumption would be that if they have the mentality that they're able to think that they're able to share advice, they don't see any boundary to any communication, be it good, bad, threatening. So why we sort of talk about mansplaining is because it's almost like, well, there's stages.
It's the stage.
Yeah, and there is a hierarchy of harassment that goes from making jokes and mansplaining, offering unsolicited advice, all the way up to kind of rape, murder, and those type of things. They're all interlinked in a way that I don't think people always acknowledge. Like, from my perspective, hearing the story from Sabrina, it's all about power. It's all about asserting their power over women. Our society is structured in a way that privileges men. Men hate it when I say privileged. So many men hate it when I say it. Being a feminist on the internet is wild. But it does. It privileges men, all men, and puts them in a position. They're male, masculine is the default in our society. So women are already fighting against that. Now, if you believe in kind of a closed system of power, I won't get too philosophical today. It's Michael Foucault, if anybody wants to read it. They want to cling to that power because they're feeling threatened and we're coming after it.
Yeah.
And keeping women in their place, there's lots of different ways to do that. And one of them is actually mansplaining. It's asserting, oh, love, I know more about this than you. You need to defer to me. I'm the expert, And it doesn't take a lot subconsciously for men to feel that way. And again, I think some mansplaining is on purpose, definitely, in my experience. But I think a lot of it is subconscious because we've just always expected men to just know about sport. It was a few years ago, it's quite funny, my husband was a producer on a football podcast. At the time, I was doing a master's degree and studying the economics of football.
Okay.
He knows nothing about the sport whatsoever. And then I did, but people would automatically ask him because he worked on a football podcast.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's just like, that's nuts.
Yeah.
But we're like that through society. We assume sport equals men, and then it's women's sports on top of that. So the behaviour that Sabrina's described is classic kind of assertion of dominance. You know, these men, women are public property. It's all right to shout at us. They weren't being encouraging. They were being threatening, even if they'd never admit that to themselves.
And I think it's a really important thing to talk about this hierarchy, because as I talk about, I mean, we've spoken about my book Black Sheep, but there's a whole chapter within that book where I talk about trail running in the Alps and sliding off the side of the mountain, screaming for my life as a woman, first and foremost, in a race that we know within ultra races, it's majority male.
Yeah.
And screaming for my life, and 5 men running past me as if I was not there. And I tell that story because it's what led to me co-founding Black Trail Runners.
Yeah.
And I talk about, and people say to me, why could they not hear you? And I always say, there's no way they couldn't. I was screaming, guttural screaming for my life. Because if I would have slipped, I would have really seriously damaged myself or been killed. And it was the 6th man that reached down to help me. Why?
Yeah.
And I know this people might think, oh, you're classing me at straws, but it starts in that, that person with his arm around my shoulder saying, and then it really grows into, why would a man who was behind a woman in a race, and you come across someone that needs your help, why would you not reach down to help them? Surely it couldn't be because if you did, they might still be in front of you.
Yeah, right.
I think it's also women from a very young age, we are conditioned to care. Yeah. We're conditioned to look out for other people. We're conditioned to make other people comfortable. You see it all the time. You see it when men subconsciously have an expectation that we will accommodate them. There's something that one of my friends refers to as patriarchy chicken.
Right.
Patriarchy chicken is where you walk down the street, you walk with purpose, and you don't move.
Okay.
You don't move out of the way. And men do this all the time without really realising it. Women don't, because we so often have trained ourselves to make ourselves small, get out of the way, avoid people, avoid trouble. We're trained to think externally, whereas actually for men, it's the reverse. So those men, it may have been that they did not want you beating them. I think that's a distinct possibility. But it's also because they've been trained to put themselves first. It's socially acceptable for them to put themselves first in a way that it isn't necessarily for women. This is why women carry the bulk of the domestic load still. Yeah. And it's why so many women drop out or alter their sport participation once they have children as well, or if they have caring responsibilities. Like when we look at marathon participation data, we see a dip after 30. That's when a lot of women have children. And, you see lots of content around women feeling guilty about taking time out to train, time away from their families to train, and that type of thing, or feeling bad because they don't feel guilty about it. Again, it's all to do with how women are conditioned to be caregivers, to prioritise other people. Whereas for men, it's acceptable to be a bit of a jerk and pass somebody who's hanging off a mountain.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, Sabrina, if you think that mansplaining is, it transcends like race and colour. Or do you think that black and brown men can be as guilty of it in a running context? as well?
Oh God, yeah. Oh my gosh. Like, let's just clear that up. Absolutely. You know, there's such a thing in, you know, you may have like misogynoir, you know, Eve, you know, so absolutely. Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I've even seen it this morning as I was on my way here, you know, kind of telling us what we should and shouldn't eat, how we should and shouldn't train, you know, and I think one of the things a couple of weeks ago, you know, a Instagram piece of content that I posted kind of very much lit me up around this. I was like, no, we cannot be silent about this anymore, which was, it was a woman who was doing hill efforts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she, you know, as we do, you know, working at a specific RPE up the hill, recover down, you know, taking some time at the bottom before. And, you know, there's the man that's kind of, you know, looping around her. She reached out to me. She said, actually, it was kind of, he kept looping. And, you know, he was saying, you know, why are you walking? You're not training to do a walking race, are you? She was just taking her recovery at the bottom of the hill sprint, you know? But absolutely, it transcends race. Let's not be shy about that. It doesn't matter how you identify ethnically.
Yeah.
This is a problem.
Yeah.
This is a big problem. So yeah, I within the communities that I lead, I see it, I call it out, and it's sometimes quite a surprise. You know, well, I just thought that, you know, trying to tell you how to run downhill as you're running downhill would have just really helped you. Just like, no, it doesn't actually.
This is maybe when you and I can answer as well, but do you think it crosses gender then? Do you think the mansplaining, has a man ever mansplained you?
Oh yeah, I think men can mansplain to men.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely true.
Yeah.
And there may even
It doesn't really have, but it doesn't have the same connotation.
I think it doesn't have the
It's
same.
annoying.
It doesn't have the same impact. Maybe it doesn't have the same impact or connotation. Yeah, and I think it's possible. It's probably possible for a woman to womansplain a man. But I think that it's kind of, this is a minority of instances, and again probably isn't coming from the same place.
I think it's really difficult to say the word womansplain.
Yeah.
Because women are already an oppressed class.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like saying that black people are being racist. I just don't think you can. I don't think that's not how the power dynamic works, at least from my perspective. What can happen is internalized misogyny, which is where, and I fully believe this is a defense mechanism and a means of survival in a male-dominated kind of post-industrial society. Again, sorry, getting a bit nerdy. But it's where women adopt the behaviors, characteristics, and values that are actually heavily masculinized and do oppress other women as a means of survival. I mean, the most pertinent pop culture reference at the moment is Bonnie Blue.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
I don't know. I just said that because actually I am really interested in that whole.
Fascinated.
Yeah, really fascinated by it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know? You know.
Yeah, she slept with 1,000 men. was it?
Allegedly. Yeah.
Allegedly. Yeah.
That.
That was,
Anyway.
Yeah. and the fact that was, you know, the whole story in itself was.
But it's how she frames it as
Yeah.
well, and how she frames it around the role of women in relationships.
Yeah.
That's internalized misogyny. So what I think can happen is women can act within internalized misogyny towards other women and potentially towards men. But I think men are insulated from it.
Yeah.
Particularly within the kind of man-woman dynamic.
Yeah. I wouldn't feel threatened. Like there wouldn't be an undercurrent of physical whatever. If a woman came up to me and said to me, "Yo, you're not doing a walking," like that same. If it was, I wouldn't be like, okay.
Yeah.
I'd have that freedom to be like, okay.
Yeah.
Whereas it's like
I know what you mean.
there's not an overbearing conscious or subconscious notion to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would almost be more that it was bullying than mansplaining.
Right.
Would be how I would see it. It's still harassment.
Yeah.
But it's got different connotations and different social outcomes and social impact. The impact of things like mansplaining on women is that they can drop out of sport ultimately.
Yeah.
They change their behaviours towards sport. It may be that they no longer feel safe doing it outside. It may be that they actually conclude that, no, it's not for them because, I don't know, they don't fit conventional beauty standards and they don't fit what we've been told an acceptable pace is. And they just go, right, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm over this now. Yeah, there is still that you can't quite reverse mansplaining, but you know, you can have internalized misogyny, and that's pretty rough too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can imagine. Yeah,
If there's anyone listening to this who's like, God, I actually am a lifelong mansplainer and I want to rehabilitate, what advice can we give to men in terms of not doing this? I mean, you said some of it might be subconscious and actually quite hard to stop.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's what we do want to happen. So what can we offer any kind of practical advice about, or like some red flags if you're like, I'm doing this, oh God, I'm probably mansplaining?
I think it's think before you speak. Like, it's that primary school thing. We have 2 ears and one mouth. And this is so often the challenge you come up against when I'm talking about things like public sexual harassment, when I'm talking about mansplaining, when I'm talking about equality in running and equity in running, is men feel the need to say, oh, what can I do to help? It's like, well, we've told you.
right.
We've talked about it a lot. Be quiet and listen to us.
Yeah.
If we want advice, we'll seek out the right person
Go to
for
a
the
coach.
job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or actually, to be honest, we'll probably seek out another woman
Yeah.
because actually the men's experiences of running is quite different from women's experiences of running. So, you know, I'm more likely to go and ask Sabrina for a bit of advice about the trails than a man. But that's really what it comes down to. So often, and you see, I've had a lot of conversations with men recently about not all men,
Yeah.
this whole thing.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
An area where I do a lot of work is around public sexual harassment. I'm an ambassador for Our Streets Now sport campaign. And I talk a lot about how, you know, we don't know which men it is. It's clearly a lot of them because the statistics suggest that it is.
Yeah.
And for women, we don't know who to feel safe with. So we have to go with a blanket approach of until proven otherwise. And so often the response from men is, oh, not all men. We'd engage more if you acknowledge not all men. And it's centering themselves in the argument. And we see this in conversations about running. We see this when men offer unsolicited advice. They're actually centering themselves and pushing us out. So it's kind of being quiet and letting women be the center of the conversation. And we've been denied that for generations and, you know, since time began really at this point. And it's a key way to change social dynamics, to change behaviors, is to go, do I need to speak? Do I need to put myself in the middle of this? Or actually, you know, can I just take a step back from this one? The guy circling a fellow runner in the park. It's like, take a beat, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, to what end is that?
But that's the thing, isn't it? And I think that, in terms of my reaction is kind of constantly to be asking yourself as a man, like, did she ask for it?
Yeah.
You know, and I want to say that in a way like when you feel, I just want to say, it's like in your head, like, but did she ask for it? No. And you know what? If as women, if I want help, I will ask for it.
Yeah.
If I want you to teach me how to run better down a hill or down a technical track,
Don't look at me.
I'm going to ask for it.
Yeah.
And probably the person that I'm going to ask is someone that I have seen, that I trust, that I like the cut of their jib.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to be the man that's doing laps around the park with me. You know, and I think that it's that, and it's also that amplification of women, you know, and it's what you've said, not centering yourself in that. You know, if you feel that your service to the running community is to help women to run better down hills, direct people to the woman that you think is running really good down hills. You know, don't tell them that. Just do it via your actions and deeds.
Yeah.
I think that constantly asking yourself the question, like, but did she ask for it? No, she didn't. So I'll just listen before I speak.
Yeah.
And it's not rocket science, but it's just getting over that like internal force that's like, I just want to tell her she just needs to lose a bit of weight. I just want to tell her that rucksack, you know, I've had it, that rucksack's too heavy.
Right.
It's too heavy for you, Sabs. It's the reason that you're finding these races hard. I'm like, I think it's more than the rucksack, actually. You know, but it's this kind of, I have to share it. No, you don't, actually. You don't have to share it. So, yeah, listen and learn.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's also engaging. There are lots of people putting out really good content around these issues, and it's engaging with it and understanding it. It's educating yourself. And stop expecting women to do the labour, because so often when these things come up, men say, "Oh, well, what should I do differently?" I said, "Well, we've told you everything. Stop relying on us to support and comfort you through this journey." Whereas actually everything is out there, and there are amazing resources out there, from individuals, women's testimonies to reports to people like me who produce kind of quasi-educational content and that type of thing, talking about these issues in a way that's accessible.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things about this discussion is that I've realised the kind of serious implications of mansplaining. I probably thought it was like a bit of an eye roll, pompous man explains something in an unnecessary way, and probably we all move on with our lives, and it's a bit of a, it's a shame it happens. But it seems like it can be the kind of the slippery slope to much more serious things.
It's also one of the big challenges with mansplaining is if a man comes up to you and says something to you, you don't know how to respond.
Yeah.
You don't know how to respond safely. Because if you do, you don't want to, but should you just smile and nod and listen to him? If you tell him to go away, is that going to cause you more danger? Sometimes it's just a shock of some random dude coming up to you and saying something.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had it before where a man has DM'd me a definition of equality.
Right.
And I just didn't know how to respond. And it was clearly a passive-aggressive gesture because he didn't agree with something I'd written. Apparently, that campaigning for maternity policy in races and saying that all women races are a very useful tool towards equity is contradictory.
Right.
It's not in the big picture. It's all strategy. Wasn't talking about equality, so he decided to school me.
Right.
And it got as far as him suggesting that, I was a bit rubbish at my job because I didn't agree with his understanding of equalities.
Yeah. It's always baffled me, the commenting, like you've read something, you can either agree or disagree.
Yeah.
But the need to sort of, I've just must write something.
Yeah.
Must. It's really important that I am able to just
You know what?
not disengage, not unfollow. I could just do that.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do kind of love it though because it creates a lot of content for me because usually by the end, these guys are providing a perfect illustration of the issue that I'm talking about.
Right, gotcha. All right, yeah.
So
Keep going.
Yeah.
it's like just give me content, make my life easier.
Yeah. But I think it's really interesting what you said, Rick, because I think as women, and I think as within the sport of running and the work that we both do, as advocates, for women of colour, et cetera, we see these small changes. We see women becoming more empowered because they are following women that give them strength and inspiration, that they are taking time to really kind of understand, for example, if they're in a training cycle and they're feeling a bit crappy, that actually, that's my changing hormone levels, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that ultimately, these harmful, fun comments or these, I didn't mean any harm by it. It is that hierarchy. And, I have a book coming out next January, which is specifically for women, brand new women runners. And it talks about, safety, periods, hormones, how to run, pace, et cetera, We, totally throw that out the window. But in the sense of we don't look at minute miles or anything like that.
Right, yeah.
But I just want more women, and I think we both to experience like the joy that comes with running. And I think we're at this really difficult point in the shift and in running becoming more acceptable, where if we don't speak up about these things, I think that we can revert very, very quickly to that stereotypical, this is what a runner looks like. This, with all the work that's been done around, this girl can, et cetera, I think that we have to continue to be really strong advocates for topics like mansplaining, the topic around why thin isn't faster. You know, every body belongs in running. You know, the fact that if you're knocking out a 15 to 18 minute mile pace and you're going out on a run, you are still a runner.
Yeah.
You know, I think we have to continue to do that, because I think with the state of the world at the moment and this segregation of them, we, him, her, etc., I think that there's this real fear that I have that these voices or these discussions will be lost.
Yeah.
And I want so wholeheartedly, I run for my mental health first and foremost. I came to it because of experience in postnatal depression. And it has given me so much. And I feel pain inside when I hear from women, which I do on DMs or in comments, that are like, and I experienced that at the hands of a man, and it made me question whether I am good enough, fast enough, I look the right way, whether I can join that club. And it really does stop women.
Yeah.
And yes, there will be men too who experience that.
Absolutely.
But we, because of the lived experience we have, because of that gender, the gender that we are, we've experienced it since day dot.
Yeah.
And I want to blow that apart, because there is just such joy to be found in this sport for everyone.
Yeah.
It's also great joy to be found in diversity within this sport. Something that's concerned me more recently is seeing the number of campaigns where actually the representation of runners is really homogenous.
Right.
Their particular brand of kind of young, cool runners, and that isn't the experience of running.
Yeah.
And your experience of running gets better the more diverse the groups you run with are, because different people bring different experiences to it. And I mean, I come from kind of crew running background, which is community first over performance or anything like that. But it really is about bringing people together and creating communities, and diverse communities thrive and they make the world a better place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. And the fact that we can do that through running is very, very
a great
cool.
thing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. Like when we were doing the research, I sort of wanted to be honest with myself. I thought, have I ever mansplained on the run?
Yeah.
I don't. I think, and I was looked back and I thought there's probably one point where I was like, I think this was a bit mansplaining. I did the gut buster, which was over in like Reading.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Which is about 7 or 8 years ago, and it was quite a small race, and I was running kind of next to the first woman, which was always quite exciting. It's kind of like, and I was like, wow, this is quite cool. She's going to win her race. And I think got to the end, I started I was opening a gate, and I said, oh, not long to go now, I reckon. And we were kind of running together, but I was like, am I now like playing the role of tour guide on a race I've never done? And she beat me anyway. And I just thought at the end, I was like, it was a little bit like that. Like, why did I feel the need to say anything? You know,
Would
I felt
you
like
have said it to a bloke?
like maybe, but I don't know.
Because there is also, I mean, again, it depends on running culture. Because like in trail running, that feels very natural.
Yeah.
Just friendly.
Well, you have a
Right. It
little
does feel
chat.
friendly, I was a bit like, am I treating this person as a kind of equal competitor here, or am I sort of assuming the role of like, follow me and we'll be all right to the end? So yeah, I just was a bit like, and I think my response now is I just don't really say much at all, you know, because I think actually no one's asking me.
You can open the gate. That's,
Open the
that's
gate.
polite.
Yeah,
That feels nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't know if you felt you'd any like.
I don't. I mean, I mean, really trying to be as honest as I can. I don't think I have. Which, I mean, I have a lot of sense of just. Perhaps my subconscious is that, or my conscious is yes, but my subconscious is no. Do you know what I mean? I'm sort of like, I've done all right, but really, I've probably at some point done something.
Yeah. It can be hard to identify.
It is, but I absolutely have I know for never ever just unsolicited advice.
Yeah.
And I think that's
yeah,
like we can probably be hard on men can probably we can be hard on ourselves. Men can do whatever we want, but we can be hard on ourselves and try and nitpick every single item as a gesture that might have been misconceived.
Yeah.
But I think to say like, have you ever put your arm around someone and given them advice?
Yeah.
And been
On not
condescending,
losing weight,
or
yeah.
or done something
That
like
was a
that.
particularly brutal one.
Well,
Yeah,
pretty
but
brutal,
but
but
never
it
ever. I
stays.
would never ever.
No.
Never
It's-
ever do that.
It's quite interesting. So another of the Streets Now sport ambassadors is Alan Sinclair, and during 16 days of advocacy in December last year, which is an intensive period of advocacy around ending violence against women and girls, he did a reel where he talked about recognizing when he had either harassed women or facilitated harassment, so not said no.
Yeah.
So that's and that was, to me, really meaningful, because not many men come out and acknowledge their role in the problem. And it was a great opportunity to then start talking about active bystander initiatives and how to intervene in a way that is meaningful and respectful if you see a woman being harassed. And mansplaining is essentially harassment. I mean, touching somebody against their will and talking about their body is definitely harassment. So, and kind of going to your mates, no, that's not cool. And I thought that was a really meaningful exercise, because mansplaining, you can kind of go through the mental archives and think, oh, well, you know, I didn't really mean it. I mean, I don't think your example was mansplaining particularly. I thought you were just being nice but and holding a gate open. But it's kind of more thinking about, okay, are there times where I've facilitated harm, and owning that? And I think that's something really powerful that men can do to support women, is owning that they have been complicit. And again, that's another thing that makes men very, very uncomfortable. But given that generations of women have been made uncomfortable and kind of socially forced to accept it, it feels like a valid challenge to say, okay, well, that's fine, but you might not have proactively done something, but how did you respond when you saw it happening? How did you call somebody out on social media? Did you kind of tell your mate that it wasn't acceptable to talk about a woman in X, Y, or Z terms? And, you know, it's worth going to Alan's feed, and it's also on the Our Streets Now feed, and seeing that reel, because it was very, very good. And a real, you know, he's really working on how to be a model for advocacy for men. But I think it does open up an interesting conversation from that too, as we've discussed all along. All this stuff is interconnected.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time coming on the Runners podcast, Sab and Bethan. Absolutely great to talk to you about this. I think, an education for you and I as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots to think about. Hopefully people watching and listening will also, I think particularly to your last point, they might well feel confident within themselves about their own personal actions, but actually the actions of others and how they've responded is also such a really important part of it. So it's, thanks very much for coming in.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks.
So that brings us to the end of this week's Runners World podcast. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.